Well, thank you for everybody for turning up to the Westeros Strathpeffer and Lochalsh committee. This is only our second one because I think we just get started in February, then the COVID hit. So it's like starting all over again, which probably we forgot what we were here for. But if we can get started, that would be great. So I don't think we've got any apologies for absence. Nope.
No apologies, nope. Ian, no.
Okay, declarations of interest from any of the councillors? Anything? I don't think we have. No.
None.
Okay, that takes us on to item 3, which is appointment of a vice chair. Nomination invited for the post of vice chair of the Westeros Strathpeffer and Lochalsh committee. Have we any nominations?
Can I propose Councillor MacLeod for vice chair?
No problem, Alex. I'll second that proposal. Okay, have we anybody else? No. Okay, I think that would be it. Okay, are you glad to accept that?
Okay, yes, I will for the time being.
Okay, no problem, that's great. Thanks.
See how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. That's great. Okay.
Appreciate your support.
Thanks, Dave. Sorry, just turning the page. Item 4 is schools reopening, and it's a verbal update from the Executive Chief Officer Education. I take it that's yourself, Paul?
That would be Councillor Coburn, and thank you for the introduction.
No problem.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members, and thank you for the invitation to join this forum this afternoon. I'm pleased to meet with you in your local area in this forum as well and have this smaller group conversation. And obviously my update follows various recent member briefings. We were focused on the reopening of our schools and ELC settings as well. So we've had member briefings recently, but also we had Education Committee last week as well. So as I said, thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to be here today. As a number of you who know me well will know that I've worked in a number of other local authorities prior to coming to this authority and worked in a number of national and local government roles in England. So I've had reasonable experience in the education and children's services and adult services space in recent years. I think in terms of the update today, the key messages are that I'd like to begin by saying a formal thank you, and a formal thank you to all members for your support, for all of the key teams, services, officers, staff in schools and settings who form what we call the education ecosystem to be able to enable our learners to be able to return to safe provision in August. We talk a lot about staff in schools and settings, so teaching staff, support staff, but there are also many other interdependent services such as colleagues from Mark's service, for example, facilities, property, cleaning, without which we'd be severely compromised. We've got a lot of work on over the summer to help prepare our buildings, to make our buildings and our environments and settings as suitable as possible for returning to safe environments in August. Transport's a massive pressure point for the Highland system. It's a big problem anyway for all local authorities nationally, but particularly for the Highland because of the rural challenge that presented. At the best of times, I understand that the transport system is pretty much maxed out in terms of capacity to be able to respond to need. So if we are looking at having to go beyond what is our preferred option of 100% return with no social distancing measures being deployed, at current, we're looking at with risk assessments being in place and social distancing measures having to be deployed. If we had to fall back on option B or C, we'd only be able to use 20% of capacity. So coaches that might have 70 places would only be able to utilise 14, for example. But that's a fallback position if we go back to social distancing measures needing to be deployed. Currently, our primary focus is on option A, 100% return to school and business as usual, as we would call it. So transport, catering, we require some real creative, bespoke catering solutions, whether that be vouchers, hot meals, or blended approach. And again, that will depend on the local setting and the best fit solution. So there's lots of moving parts, is what I'm trying to say. in response to ensuring that our schools and settings can reopen safely, but also have the right support structures to make sure that the learner experiences as best as possible. So I'd like to thank you all as members for formally recognising that. So I said about the options. The options are important here. We've been working to those 3 options. And option A is the primary one we're focusing on. Risk assessments are king. Risk assessments are critical here because they're at the forefront of making sure that our buildings and settings are as secure as possible. So all of our schools have had to undertake risk assessments to run alongside their operational plans. We have 203 schools. We have 2,500 teaching staff. We have 1,000, just short of 1,000 PSA staff, or support staff, should I say. There's a lot of staff in the system. And then when we start adding up the support staff from other agencies who are playing a part in enabling our schools to reopening. So risk assessments are crucial. Without risk assessments, the provision won't be opening. So our head teachers have been very adept in recent weeks and months with the support of partners in being agile, in continuously thinking about scenario-based planning, previously working towards scenario C, which was 50% reopening, with social distancing measures being deployed at 2 meters. This week, we were fortunate to receive from HMIE a positive endorsement of the report that we submitted with a focus on schools reopening, that gave an overview of our plan, our approaches, and our structures. Colleagues will be well aware that Edinburgh's plan publicly didn't land too well with the First Minister, whereas the Highland plan has come back in a positive state. I remember when I used to inspect local authorities and having an obsession on focusing on the negative and making lots of recommendations in where they were weak or shortcomings. And when I've operated as a centrally government commissioned commissioner, where local authorities are in special measures or in section 114 space because they've not been able to manage their budget effectively, where I as a commissioner or an inspector have had an obsession on what are they not doing so well. Well, the Highland report that's come back from HMIE, if we're looking at the negative element, if we're looking at the recommendations, actually is very short. We've actually come out quite favourably. It's still a draft report as yet, so we're not able to share wider until it's concluded, but the final version should be with us in the next 10 working days. The intention is to share the final version of the report with Education Committee in August and be able to share with members once it's formalised. But generally, it's an endorsement that our plans for schools reopening has landed quite favourably and compares favourably with other local authorities as well. So as I said, we've been working towards 3 options now. We've really narrowed that down to a focus on 1, 100% return in August with no social distancing measures. Our head teachers and our school staff have been great in terms of being flexible and continue to adapt. We've been getting information on a daily or weekly basis from national government and from COSLA and from other local authorities to help refine our plans and adapt our plans. And I understand today there was due to be an announcement from the First Minister on transport. I've been in meetings today, so I've not heard that as yet. And hopefully that announcement will give us further information with regards to the transport measures. Questions have come up recently regarding transport, learners or young people having to wear masks or not wear masks, or social distancing measures been deployed. Some of you may have heard the announcement, so you may be able to give me some insight. So I've not heard it as yet. I'll no doubt catch up later on. Since I started with the organisation beginning of June, full time, as I've shared with colleagues, we've been on a wide-reaching programme of consultation and co-design with our schools and partners and parents and carers. In fact, my second week in post, we had a meeting with the Highland Parent Council Partnership, which saw in excess of 180 parents in attendance in the meeting, contributing to the shaping and designing of our plans. And then beyond that, all local schools had subsequent meetings with their parent council partnerships to give the parents the local detail that was relevant to their school and their setting with regards to what the world could or would look like for August schools return. So parents have been involved in shaping and designing our plans. For colleagues who would have had sighting of the recently developed webpage on the council website, focus on schools reopening, you'll see frequently asked question documents for parents and carers, which our local parents and carers have played a big role in shaping and designing. We've also developed something similar for staff in schools, which our head teachers and school staff have played a role in shaping and designing, again, in a spirit of co-production and co-design. And also we've got something similar with a focus on our special schools, because we recognise the specialism and the complexity and need that our learners in special schools and their staff have as well. So there's been a need to develop something similar. No one's saying we have all the answers, because no one does. This is unprecedented times. There's a lot of learning by doing with regards to this area, and that's not just for education and learning, but for all council services and folk who support us and challenge us. So there's lots going on. Progress has been made. We're really focusing on option A, but we recognise there's a long way to go. Over the month of July, there'll be more announcements that come, and hey, we may well have to adjust our plans even further. But at now, the focus is on option A, 100% return with no social distancing measures being deployed. So hopefully that gives you an update, in addition to the recent Education Committee meetings and the previous member briefing sessions as well. I'm happy to take any questions through the chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions? Yeah, Derek?
Yes, I believe the chairman, John Finlayson, and David Summers are working on a specific transport study, if you like. I wondered, when are they going to report on this?
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. In terms of, I chaired this morning a meeting of the programme board, which has a focus on schools reopening, of which transport is one of the 11 subgroups. In terms of the timescale for that study, I couldn't give you that information at this juncture. I'll follow up with Councillor Finlayson and David on. As you can imagine, there's lots of moving parts. We're looking at options for catering, we're looking at options for IT, we're looking at options for facilities management. There's a range of options, and obviously that transport piece will be informed by what comes out of the announcement today. So my guess is that David Summers and Councillor Finlayson will have regard to that, and that will help inform their report. But in terms of the specific timescale, Councillor MacLeod, for that, I'm not aware as yet. But I'm due to follow up with David Summers later on today after the announcement to see what the implications are, and no doubt we'll get back to you with regards to a timescale for that.
Okay, thank you. I would like at this point to place on record our appreciation for Norma Young and her efforts in this part of the world. She was notable for her thorough knowledge of all parts of the territory, and therefore having a quick resolution to hand for most things that cropped up. And she will be a great miss from this area. Thank you.
Can I just respond to that, Councillor MacLeod? Not respond to it, but echo that. I suppose my last 30 years working in local government at national and local level, I've come across a lot of individuals. I've worked with prime ministers, I've worked with secretaries of state, I've worked with officers, I've worked with some fantastic people. Norma Young is without doubt one of those special people that in a short space of time, I've quickly reached the inescapable conclusion is an outstanding practitioner and operator, well regarded, and a real heavyweight in what she does. She'll be a big loss to the Highland Council. She'll be a big loss.
Yeah, I need to agree with that. It will be a big loss for Norma, especially Norma and Robbie Bain going from Westeros, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh. It's a big loss because the two of them are big hitters in the area. So, and we're going to have to get replacements quite quick. What are we doing, Paul? Do you know about a replacement for Norma?
Councillor Coburn, we're due to be taking a proposed structure for education services to Education Committee in August, and subject to the outcomes of that, if the proposals within that are ratified, then we'll go into implementation. So naturally, when anyone leaves the organisation in such a key role, you ask the question, can we redesign, can we do things differently? And before we rush to replacing like for like, particularly as we're going through a world of transformation as an organisation, as part of a wider council proposed programme of transformation, we have to consider all options. Is there an internal solution, potentially? Do we change the operating model? So in terms of a simple answer to your simple question, there will be a short-term interim solution, absolutely. But beyond Education Committee in August, we will continue to work to the 4 areas, head of education in each area model. But it's a case of what's the best fit solution. But my expectation is we will be able to find a Highland solution to that challenge. And there are conversations ongoing, which I couldn't divulge at this juncture, but there will be a solution.
Okay, regarding the interim, who do we go to at this present time if we've got questions directly for education in this area?
Norma is with the organisation until the 17th of July, and then next week there'll be an announcement about what the short-term interim replacement will be. There are one or two internal discussions that still have to take place and formalised before we can announce who the interim will be, but there'll be an announcement next week.
Okay, that's great, because 3/4 of the schools are in Norma's area and about, well, probably just less than a quarter are in the area with Dingwall catchment. So as usual, our ward gets a bit split up. But, that would be great if we can get that information next week.
No, that information for you will be invaluable. As I say, you need that point of contact. You need that local area lead professional to be that figurehead for education in your area. I appreciate that. So, so we've identified someone, a conversation has taken place, but I need to formalise things with our HR colleagues as well before I can make an announcement.
Okay, that's great. Alex?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Paul, for the update and all the other previous reports that we've been having over the last number of weeks. They've been really helpful, beneficial, and being able to relay that information back to our communities has been key. I just want to take the opportunity as well, just to endorse what my colleagues have spoken about in respect of Norma Young. And there's another strand to Norma as well, which I think has to be looked at going forward in whoever replaces Norma. At this moment in time, you almost feel she's irreplaceable, but it's her knowledge, it's her strength and her respect within the Gaelic community, within the schools communities. I think it'd be quite important to emphasise on that going forward. She does command that enormous respect within the communities, especially in respect of Gaelic. I've just got one other quick question, and I think it's probably been answered in previous feedback meetings, but obviously with the schools now shut and preparing for opening on the 11th of August, there were a number of schools that would have had elements of work or renovation carried out within them over the summer holidays. But I'm just posing the question and assuming that at this moment in time that work would be put on hold to maintain the biosecurity of schools, once they're cleaned and prepared for opening, or is that work able to continue within some of the schools?
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGuinness. In terms of we've minimised work that's due to be going on in our schools or activity that's due to be going on in our schools, because the primary focus is on keeping the buildings clean and preserved and ready for return. I've heard, a number of our schools have letting activity going on, and we've had to be clear that we'll have to find some workarounds because we will not be able to have those activities ongoing because it is about preserving the buildings for readiness in August.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I can pass it on to a number of the schools here who are asking if that work would go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, Biz.
I wanted it noted of my total regret at the loss of Norma, who was an encyclopedia of knowledge and education. I've worked with them both, and Robbie Bain, our ward manager. I've worked with them both for 20 years. I was at Norma's wedding when she got married. She's my friend as well as an education officer. And in my mind, we've lost two of our best councillor officers from Highland Council. But nothing ever stays the same. We have to move on in life. And I wish them both a happy retirement and every blessing to them. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'm sure those news are passed on. And every week, Norma gives us updates on education, all four of us, and every opportunity to ask her whatever was necessary to do with education in our wards, and she was only too willing to supply it. Irrespective of politics. Yeah, she set a high bar. She set a very high bar in terms of standards, and whoever walks into those shoes
an incredibly high bar for personal and professional reasons. She's an exceptional individual. I've only known her for 5-6 weeks, but I've been impressed with her work ethic and the way she goes about her business. And well, she's clearly had a significant impact. So no words can look at the loss that we're going to have. But the world moves on. It's an opportunity to do things differently, but she'll be a big loss. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, members, have we any more questions for Paul at this time? No doubt there'll be a lot going forward, but at this time, have we any more? Nope. Okay,
I just want to say to Paul how difficult it must be for him in his job, coming straight in out of the cold into people he's never met. And I want to thank him for the way he conducted the Education Committee. It must be really difficult for you, Paul. And welcome to the Highlands. Hope you'll stay a while.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell, and thank you for your appreciation. It's as a career interim director or executive, you get used to going into new organisations and meeting people and starting again. And you know, no two authorities are ever the same. So I've worked in some big county councils and city councils and small borough councils, but no two authorities are ever the same. The people are always different. The context is always different. And you know, when I started with Highland, everybody said, "But we're different." And you think, okay, yeah, everyone says that to me. But Highland generally are different for a number of reasons. And I thank you for the warm reception, Councillor Campbell. And when you mentioned about cold, I know when I see everybody, when I have meetings and they're wearing 3 layers, I know what I'm looking forward to when I do land eventually. But I do look forward to physically being in the region in the coming weeks and spending more time with you all.
All the best.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. Okay, if we can move on to the next item, which is item 5, which is the first one's the Highland Council response to COVID-19 presentation. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to pull up the presentation. Hopefully this will work. In a minute. There we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. I'll just take myself off there. That's great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation to the committee. I'm just going to go through the various slides. My apologies. There we go. So really what the Highland Council's community response has been very much centred around what originally was called the Humanitarian Assistance Centres, now more friendly called the community hubs. And HACs, as they were called, these are really an established part of any emergency response. They were established in 2009, but the problem is that they were really established in situations where people needed to come together for protection, for assistance. It may have been like reception centres, but clearly the entire opposite was needed in this case. So with the establishment of these humanitarian assistance centres, what we were trying to do is to make sure that everybody who needed the support was going to get it, regardless of the geography, regardless of their difficulties. So you can see the statistics there. There were a huge number of people within the shielding group across Highland, over 8,000 people. And those in the shielding categories were those who had specific health conditions which made them very vulnerable to COVID-19. And initially, obviously, the guidance was that they should stay shielding for around 12 weeks. But of course, there were other vulnerable people as well who weren't shielding. And a couple of examples there, for example, those who had a flu jab, who were over 70. But most worryingly, probably, and the one that we've been uncertain what the impact was, is those whose circumstances have changed. They may not have been vulnerable at the outset because they had a good salary coming in, there were no difficulties, no financial difficulties, but they needed support. And as circumstances have changed through this emergency, we've been very mindful that that support needs to flex and change as circumstances change as well. So the Council's response included setting up the helpline, which was the 0300 number that we all used. There was also a specific shielding helpline set up as well. So we had 30 staff operating these helplines, and they were mainly staffed by High Life Highland staff and also colleagues from Eden Court as well. So as well as the volume of incoming calls, which was nearly 6,000 calls from the end of March, we also have made over 5,000 outward calls to shielding people. And that's just making sure that they are okay, that is there anything that they need that we can help with. And the other side of it was to establish the local community hubs as well. So 10 of those set up across Highland, and the relevant one for this committee area was obviously the one established in Ullapool, which we'll come back to as well. And this was a very general helpline where people could phone up. They may have run out of money on their electricity meter, they may have no food in the house, maybe had lost their job, didn't know which way to turn. So there was a whole response there required. And that response came from right across the council for both the helplines and the community hubs. We utilised council officials from planning and development, from environmental health, from catering, parking enforcement. There was a huge service-wide response to that, which was very, very welcome. And the coordination of food supplies at the start, particularly, that was very difficult because people weren't entirely sure. The shops were being stripped of supplies. The government packages hadn't started, but that we knew that we had to get a response quickly onto the ground. The food that was being distributed through Highland, that was coming in direct to Inverness from Fairshare. There was a distribution centre being set up in Inverness, and that then distributed across the rest of Highland. And behind it all, there were the virtual hub colleagues, again, many from policy section and other sections helping, and that was helping making sure these hubs could be staffed, gathering information on the local community groups. And also there was a strong liaison between Highland Council and also HTSI, and that was about gathering information for both people wanting to volunteer and for other groups as well. So I've touched on the fact that the shielding groups were really looking for support for food. There was the Scottish Government parcels that kicked in, 971 individuals for Highland, and support for food. Prior again to that, to these becoming established, there was 552 individuals there who needed that food prior to the government parcels coming in. And a lot of the referrals that we were getting, these were coming in self-referrals, as I've mentioned, from the helplines, but also we were getting referrals from NHS adult social care, children and families teams, housing team, welfare support. And we were also fielding out inquiries as well and making sure that people were getting the right support and directing on to the welfare support team, where we would often do what was called a warm handover. People didn't have the confidence perhaps to actually say we don't have any money, and it was taking a huge amount for often people to pick up the phone to that helpline in the first place, because people are so fiercely independent they didn't want to ask for help. Other support that was given, pharmacy deliveries have been a large part of that, right across Highland. And this again, people who had no access or their pharmacy wouldn't deliver, and they maybe didn't want community groups to do it. So again, we would do direct pharmacy deliveries as well. And we would also make sure that individuals had a weekly contact just to make sure they weren't too isolated, whether they needed more advice or guidance, and also again, signposting to local community groups where these existed. Key one for yourself around the local arrangements. In terms of Ullapool itself, it was running 5 days a week from 9 to 5 p.m. And core partners again in there, High Life Highland, huge number of community groups, and we'll speak more about the community groups in a minute. And as I've said, a wide variety of council services helping with that response. The virtual hub received referrals, as I say, like the other areas from different places, whether it was the NHS or then these would be passed on to community groups if relevant, or delivered to or dealt with by ourselves if there was no community group in the area, or perhaps for any reason they couldn't respond, or more usually perhaps a member of the public didn't want their details shared and did request that we fulfilled that request ourselves. Just because of the very nature of the Western Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh, a massive area, and we developed, when I say we, I'll come back to Robbie in a minute, but we developed a very pragmatic approach where, because of the geography, it wasn't possible to utilise a specific hub, the geography of the area. So the main hub was based in Ullapool, but largely deliveries were going out from Ullapool, but also from vans running out of Gairloch and Plockton as well. And we also had further support coming in from Kyle too. So right across the geography in terms of the council's own response, we were able to provide that. We'd say there was also a water delivery service on offer as well for anybody on private water supplies who had actually run out of water. So as I mentioned, all areas of Wester Ross have been responded to either by the community groups or by ourselves. Food deliveries, again, a lot of those have been direct, but it may be that just people needed help in terms of signposting to other resources. Mental health support was one that we became increasingly aware of as the emergency continued. That was one where people were becoming perhaps more irritated on phone lines, more concerned, more emotional, and it was becoming clear that there was more mental health support required. And they, again, were being signposted either to local mental health support groups or indeed to the national charities as well. The emergency liaison groups, specific liaison groups set up for the response to the COVID pandemic, and that was chaired by Robbie. And the particular focus of the ELGs, these are multi-agency meetings which have all the blue light services, but also supported by people like Marine and Coast Guard Agency, RNLI, and we had really, really good engagement from absolutely everybody. And what they were particularly concerned about was trying to identify where there may be any gaps in support, but also to resolve any kind of practical issues. Perhaps somebody lived in a particularly isolated location. They may have been concerned about how an ambulance would get to that location, and these things were being resolved through that multi-agency response, and that was really, really helpful. And again, the community partnership, I think in most areas, the local council for voluntary service were involved with that as well. Just to give you an idea of the numbers of the people that we were supporting, you can see there, if you tilt your head, 54 people getting the government parcels, emergency food parcels being provided to a number of people, but also lots of signposting for shopping and referrals onto community groups for that. You can see the prescription deliveries there, but social contact was also a huge bit of it, where people were just beginning to feel very isolated, in some places very scared as well, and just needing to hear a friendly voice and know that support was there if they needed it. I would say the number of people requiring support at this time is reducing right across Highland, but in all areas, including this area, there are still a number of households requiring support directly from the council's community hubs. Although the number of requests is declining, what we have made sure is that all the retain ability to scale up the operations if that becomes needed. And that could be as furlough ends, people lose more income, may become vulnerable again, or it may be as a result of, track and protect, where there are more contacts identified who have to shield at home. I would like to say it's absolutely Robbie Bain who has been instrumental in all of this. So I'm just repeating the success that he has established in putting the hubs together and developing particularly the sort of modal version of having the outposts in the form of vans. And that response from Robbie has been absolutely fantastic and only be to be expected. And I'd like to thank him for all the effort that he put into that, which was just great. In terms of key learning points, what have we learned from this? Probably what we all knew already is that Highland remains a fantastically neighbourly area. Everybody will go a long way to assist other people who need help. And that's been quite clear in terms of the community response here. We've had very, very good partnership working with agencies, with other voluntary groups, with partners who have come forward, who maybe were unknown before. And again, that's very welcome. To say that hub system that Robbie established, that was really good, because with your geography, it's just couldn't be covered from one place. And I think the biggest thing was the willingness from everybody to really engage and find solutions in the problems that we had in front of us. And that was always looking for a different way of doing things. Challenges, it's exactly the reverse of the positives in a way. It was because of that geographic area that we had to find inventive solutions. Pace of change, that was probably the biggest change or the biggest challenge at the very beginning, where sometimes decisions were changing, twice a day rather than once a week or once a month. So keeping up with that change was particularly difficult. Coordinating response initially as well, because there were pockets of volunteers and new groups popping up for all the right reasons, but just trying to identify particularly where there was overlap and any gaps. That was a particularly important bit. Probably at the very outset as well was funding that initial response as well. Although substantial funding started to come through into the third sector, later on, that initial response, and that was literally people begging, stealing and borrowing in terms of goodwill, local shops being fantastic in terms of their response, donating stock, and individuals putting their hands in their own pockets and groups putting their hands in their petty cash and saying, yeah, we can help here, which was just excellent. What it has given us is that really strong opportunity now to capture that work going forward, and we need to do that before all the engagement and all the enthusiasm sort of dissipates and before volunteers become too fatigued with the day job that is now creeping in. I think one of the really nice things to see was new alliances between communities, and often these were geographic alliances and also sort of communities of interest, because a whole number of organisations can be quite territorial, shall we say, and they do sort of guard, but this was just an absolutely joined up approach right across the piece. Use of IT, just what we're doing today, would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. And I think from community groups, community councils, who are all using and very comfortable now with Zoom, Skype, BT Meet Me, it's made a huge difference. And I think there's a real opportunity for us as a council now to make use of that and to develop our engagement to make sure it's a lot stronger. And given that we can now do that without having to travel, more importantly, without any expectation perhaps that communities have to travel to us. And I think the community confidence is the final bit there, because it would have been impossible for the council on its own to deliver this response, but the communities have very much been given they've taken the lead, quite rightly, and they've been given their head to be able to do that and really shown us how they can deliver for their communities, which is tremendous. Next steps are around that ongoing shielding support, because people will need to continue to shield, but that's always in terms of the government guidance, as I said earlier, about those who may be then contacted through Test and Protect. Fallen income, we need to be very aware and ready to capture anybody who may be suffering because of that. And also in terms of the direct management of the hubs, is that withdrawal of the ward management team and what will replace it. And of course the decision that the council to review all the COVID related activity by the end of July. So just in terms of, before I hand over to Joe, just in terms of the working with communities, said a huge response there from all the communities. You can see the figures there. The Highland Council, I think, probably started up the first sort of cash budget, which was a small money now compared to the big money coming through then, but it was absolutely critical in helping that initial response as well. And we're also able to offer the help and the guidance through environmental health, because again, for the first time, some community groups were delivering cooked meals, were delivering frozen meals, and that environmental health guidance was absolutely critical to them to make sure that everybody remained healthy. Groups right across Highland, 340 groups registered to support, provide support across Highland, and 40 groups supporting the Ullapool hub, which is just absolutely amazing. These groups were right across the piece: Glenelg, Gairloch, Lairg, Ullapool. I don't think there was a single area of the ward which didn't have cover from somewhere. And again, 23 there providing that social isolation support and information. That was absolutely critical for people who, as I say, were perhaps scared, didn't know what's happening, didn't know how to get support, and often just didn't feel they could possibly pick up the phone and ask for help. In terms of the funding that's been distributed across Highland, 2.2 million. A lot of that via HIE in terms of the Supporting Communities Fund, the Wellbeing Fund as well, with the other big hitters in there. But that just made all the difference to the communities. Within the area itself, total funding attracted just over £200,000, which again changed the game, particularly for the areas, for lots of smaller groups who were able to respond directly. And again, the big money there in from HIE, £167,000 for communities to deliver aid, which was just excellent. Just before I hand over to Joe, it's a slightly different slide in terms of the business support, and this is really just a summary of what was given out to the businesses so far. Across Ross, this is a Ross and Cromarty figure of just over £12.5 million there. And that, again, thanks need to go to colleagues in D&I particularly for the huge efforts they made in making sure that these grants were processed and out the door and back into businesses just as soon as possible. So, Chairman, I'll just hand over to Joe if you're happy at that stage, or I can take questions at this stage, whichever you prefer. I think you're on mute.
Keep forgetting about that. Biz, have you got a question? I think Biz is on mute now.
I think Derek had his hand up before me.
All right, sorry, I could only see, sorry, I saw you first. Derek?
Yes, you mentioned Robbie Bain's efforts there in terms of this whole COVID response. And as usual, it was excellent. Fitted bill. In the wider situation or the wider sense, I would like to put on record at this point my disappointment that Robbie is not going to be with us any longer, apparently. He had formed he was a kingpin in the relationship between councillors and officialdom. He'll be sorely missed. I wondered if you can give us, I noticed a slide number 10 of 16. Could you put that up again, please?
No, now you're going to challenge me. Oh, here we go. Slide 10. What was the heading, sorry, on that? 8, 9, 10. Was that the next steps? That one? That one?
Yeah, that one, yeah. Managed withdrawal of ward management team with other support in place. What does that mean?
I think what we are trying to do across Highland, and I think we've still got Alison Clark might be in the background just now, certainly across Highland, the ward management support that has been into all the hubs does need to be withdrawn, because you'll be very aware yourselves that the business as usual is starting to creep up the ward agenda with the establishment of ward business meetings, but members particularly looking forward, looking to the recovery phase as well from this. But equally, it's an unusual emergency, because while we're in recovery, we're also still in response mode as well. So there'll certainly be no question of any withdrawal of support for the community hubs until there is a network of support in place. But I don't know if Alison wants to say any more on that.
Okay, that's understood. I thought it meant something else. What can you tell us in regard to Robbie's replacement? I know we're dealing with yourself in the first instance, but the plans for Robbie's replacement.
Yeah, again, oh, sorry, I was just going to say again, similar to Paul's response about Norma, that needs to be a basis for discussion, and we will have it. I'm certainly, as you say, an interim just now until we have that new structure in place. But again, I can't give you an update on that just now, I'm sorry.
And when you said the new structure, will that involve a restructuring, as Paul Senior referred to in the education setting, or will it be continuing with the existing structure and just a replacement for Robbie himself?
I think what we'll be looking at is whether or not, in terms of what's gone on just now, in terms of the placemaking, in terms of recovery, that there does need to be a look at that, and whether that is a restructure or replacement, I think still needs to be fully worked through. I think Alison is maybe going to come in, Chairman.
Okay, Alison, do you want to come in at this point?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor, and I think Dot's expressed it very well. What we will be looking, and you'll have already had some communication from myself, to have interim arrangements in place to ensure that there's support for the ward going forward, and then we'll take stock about how we move forward in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the communication we had from yourself was directing us in the direction of 2 clerical assistants in Lochalsh.
No, there's well, we could discuss this in more detail maybe in the workshop later on, but certainly there's an assistant ward manager to provide support around more discretionary budgets. Dot herself is actually going to provide direct support in terms of ward business meetings going forward, and also for general inquiries or day-to-day inquiries, we've got additional arrangements in place. So there's a range of interim arrangements to ensure that we've got support for yourselves going forward.
Who is the assistant ward manager?
That's Emma Taylor.
Okay.
Okay. Biz?
I just want to there again reiterate about Robbie and all the hard work he put in for over the COVID crisis and liaising with different groups. And I can't speak about the rest of Wester Ross, but for the whole of Lochalsh, I want it noted and thanked for the excellent, and I say excellent, response from Kyle Development Trust. They instantly got into action, and I did a Zoom meeting with them every Wednesday, and they had all 7 community council members, chairs, going into that Zoom meeting, and then every community in Lochalsh, the volunteers who did excellent work, and I want to thank them all very, very much.
Okay, thanks, Biz. Alex?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, thanks, Ian, and thanks, Dot, for the presentation and on the update, and also thank you for all your help in the last couple of weeks with some challenges within this part of the ward here. And again, I just want to pay tribute to Robbie. I was kind of at a loss myself. I didn't really want to phone him up and wish him all the best. I kind of hoped that he might reappear. But yeah, no, I think it's really, really important, just as we discussed earlier in respect to Norma, that we get a like-for-like replacement. I know that's easier said than done, but they really were key strands on the West Coast community and within Ward 5 especially, and helped me enormously in the challenge of being inducted and becoming a councillor. So yeah, I just want to just back what my colleagues have just stated in respect of Ward 5. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I'll just take this chance myself. I mean, I've worked with Robbie for over 8 years now, and he's been terrific in the ward and a terrific help when you needed anything. Just a phone call away and you would at least get an answer. I mean, I didn't use him for everything, but I used him for certain things that I just didn't know or cropped up. So Robbie was a great help. You could bounce things off him. It was terrific. And honestly, and I've really got to put this on record, I've already said it, I don't understand Highlands councils thinking in this point regarding Robbie. Robbie wanted to stay on for a few days a week to do Wester Ross, Lochalsh and Strathpeffer ward, which I think would have been ideal and would have helped the council itself. Losing that experience, it's not easy to gain that experience of this ward because of the size of it. And I just think if Highland Council think they're supplied with that many people with Robbie's ability on the grounds, especially in Wester Ross that we've seen, then I'm sorry, but I'll still have to find some of them. There's a lot of great people, but I think with the knowledge of him in this area, it'll be a sad loss. But Dot, I've got one question for you regarding your slideshow, and it's regarding the hubs for over the summer for children, for workers, etc. Now, as you know, our wards are a wee bit split. So the hub, so we've got people in Strathpeffer who are case 1 workers, work in the hospital. Now, they seem to now begin to difficult. Their hub is in Dingwall. But they applied to Dingwall again because they had to reapply, and it seems they've all been refused. Do you know what's happening in Dingwall regarding the hub?
No, it's honest answer, no, but I will find out for you and get back to you.
If you could, because I tell you what's happened is I've had a few emails. I've also had emails with the MSP who has contacted the council but getting no replies at all, and that's to the top. Nothing seems to be coming back, which makes them suspicious that something's going on, of course. But it'd be great if you could find out.
Yeah, that's fine. Come back to you with that. Yep.
Again, because it's Dingwall, people think it's not in our area, but we've got a lot of people, like the schools are all in that Dingwall area. So that would be great to do that.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions for Dot?
I would just like to take the opportunity take the opportunity to back all that you said about Robbie, and I feel that the council has, let's say, overlooked the value of Robbie's knowledge in this part of the world. What he had proposed seemed entirely suitable, but there you have it.
Yep, I agree with you. Thanks, Derek. Thanks a lot. Okay, we'll go into the...
No, sorry, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Biz, I thought you'd spoken. My apologies. Okay, Biz, go for it.
Robbie wanted to do the flexible working policy of Highland Council and work 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And his knowledge of the whole of the West Coast and knowing everybody, as I reiterated before, is irreplaceable. And when Derek said the Highland Council, we are the Highland Council, Derek. Sorry, we are. Each and every one of us are the Highland Council. And because I'm part of an administration, I wasn't told any more or given any more reasoning of Robbie's departure than any of the rest of you.
I didn't suggest that you had.
No, but what I'm saying is we are all Highland Council, the Highland Council. We are all Highland Council. The minute we're elected, and we are Highland Council.
Maybe so.
We are.
Okay, right, we'll move on. Alison, did you have your hand up there? No?
It's okay, Councillor, I can pick it up later, thank you.
Right, no problem at all. Yeah, we can talk about it in the workshop if you want. Okay, we move to Joe.
Hello.
If you want to get through your presentation, that'd be great.
I don't actually have a presentation. I was just going to give you a general overview
problem.
About the third sector. But first I wanted to just let everyone know, I'm not too sure how much you know about how the Highland Third Sector Interface HTSI provisions support in this area. So SLCVO are the rural partner for Skye, Lochalsh and Wester Ross. So the area that we don't cover is Strathpeffer. That's covered by Voluntary Action Rossshire.
Gotcha.
And at the moment, they're just their contract is being eased down. And as of the start of September, the HTSI will be directly delivering support services in Strathpeffer. They have an actual team now set up dedicated to that, and Voluntary Action Rossshire will no longer be part of the HTSI Rural Partnership. So just so that you're aware of that. So I've been working with groups in Lochalsh and Wester Ross, and what I wanted to do is just give you a general overview about the three main hub areas that the third sector and communities have rallied around. So in Lochalsh, the Kyle and Lochalsh Community Trust brought together all the community council areas and the third sector groups to form the Lochalsh Community Response. They set up a helpline for local people, and they work with the co-op in distributing food that was out of date or going by the end of day food, and the local spa. And through that food share, since the start of April, they've actually redistributed £18,000 worth of food waste back into the community. So quite a huge effort from themselves. They've set up a voucher scheme, which was through funding from HIE, and that voucher scheme, they're giving vouchers of around £900 a week to local families to help them. They've set up quite a lot of online and telephone activities for people's mental health and well-being. They've been doing foraging, virtual foraging. They've been holding telephone ceilidhs, and these have brought the whole community quite well together. They've set up a newsletter. They've got funding for a community newsletter, and that was first of all hand delivered to every single property in the Lochalsh area, and now it's available online and in local shops and garages where people can pick it up. And part of the newsletter, they're moving forward now to an area profile. So each community council area is going to have a dedicated profile in different newsletters, and I think the first one is Strom Ferry. I think that's going to be the first one. The Lochalsh community response was very much enabled to happen because the Highland Lochalsh Community Trust have been working previously on bringing the community together for a area-wide community development plan with support from SCDC and ourselves. So they already had that foundation in place to work together as a whole, the third sector. And now what they're doing, they're looking at the next phase of how they come out of recovery, but also funding for all these supports, and the food and the vouchers stops at the end of September. Nobody knows what's going to happen yet. So there's a lot of food provision and a lot of activities that may not continue after September. So there's a lot of people being serviced at the moment by these food distribution places that may not have that. So they're looking at, if that doesn't continue, what can happen. Also, the trust who are leading the helpline and the coordination of this, their project workers will be returning back to their normal day-to-day jobs in October very quickly. So again, they're looking at how they can continue that. There may be these small mutual aid groups that have been set up, like the Kyle Street Helpers, who may continue as a community group, they may not. We're not too sure yet, but we're working with all these with them to see how they move forward. In Ullapool, the Community Trust in Ullapool did something very similar. They brought together the community councils and local groups in the area, including Koyak, and they set up a helpline, and people would phone in and get help and be signposted. They also set up a voucher scheme, and they're now focusing on the recovery and what their communities are looking at. And they've just, I don't know if any have seen it, but they published a report from a survey they recently held. They had 425 respondents to it of the people in the community saying what their fears are about coming out of the emergency situation, about the welcoming back of tourists to the area, how they see their future. So if you've not read it, it's available on their Facebook page, and you can get it as a download from SLCVO Facebook page as well. It's a good read. South Westeros and Gairloch, it was a lot of the focus. Gale did an awful lot of community response, and they acted as the anchor organisation for the Gairloch area. You also had the Community Car Scheme, who had just won the Queen's Award for volunteering in June, and they used their their car drivers to maintain the car service, but also was doing some deliveries. Southwest Community Car Scheme in Applecross and Torridon, they took up that mantle of doing the food deliveries and making sure people were okay. So there's a huge community effort from very small township, even street level response to wider coming together. The next phase for everyone is moving forward. I've had a lot of discussions with groups, and one of their main fears is a lot of groups are now at the stage they were just about to start new projects, and they were looking at getting in project workers, and they're wondering now whether or not that's going to be difficult for them. People on there's a group in Westeros who have got a contract for, I think it's 21 hours a week as a project development worker. They don't know whether they're going to be able to attract anyone to that, particularly with accommodation. So I'm sitting with each of the main hubs and I'm talking to them, and we're keeping everyone, trying to connect them, and also working with the HTSI to see how we can better support the third sector coming out. But again, the big thing is funding. Services will probably stop after September, and also groups who had to stop delivering services because they couldn't in COVID, they're going to struggle with funding. There's a very simple thing is the co-op backpack. It's a really good way of people raising money. Little things like that are not happening. The agricultural shows, the galas, none of these are happening. So a lot of groups will not have that opportunity to raise money. So they're looking at, hopefully there'll be funding bodies out there who can do that, who can help. But again, we're waiting for everyone to say what their next stage is for the recovery. And that's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks a lot. I think we've got first question from Biz.
think you're on mute, Biz.
Sorry, I had the mic on. Thank you, Joe, for your presentation. I know you and know the good work you do. I've worked, been at meetings with you. And may I reiterate about the Kyle Development Trust? They've been stalwarts right through this, the newsletter, the Zoom meetings on gardening, Kayleys, knitting, you name it, they were doing it for everybody. It made the whole community such a close-knit community.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to express my sorrow at Jo leaving as the director of the Development Trust. She's gone on to better things and better places and higher places. And I wish her all the best for the future and thank her for all she's done for Kyle Development Trust. Thank you.
Yeah, she'll be lost. She'll be missed.
And can I just add that our community planning partnership, where the Kyle Development Trust outshone the community planning partnership, which up in our ward is almost non-existent. But if it ever starts again, I want Kyle Development Trust right in the centre of it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Biz. Derek?
What's your view to contacting you?
Sorry, Derek, what was that?
What is your surname? Joanne what?
Ford.
Ford. Okay,
Ford.
Thank you. Thank you. Expect a communication.
Okay, any other questions for Joe? No. No, I've got to say all the community groups, I mean, from the whole ward, from Strathpeffer all the way down to Glen Elg, etc., they've all really worked hard and they've all came to the fore, which has been a terrific, really terrific effort during the COVID. And of course, yeah, you're right, Joe. Hopefully we are coming to the end of it. You're frightened to say anything else, but hopefully we are. It's what happens after, because we don't know, as you say, with employment, furlong, a lot of the tourist industry in this area, we rely on a lot of tourist industry. Hopefully they can get something out of the season, but we need to see what happens. So I think it's going to be an ongoing pressure right through the winter to next year. See how it goes. Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. That's great. I think, to be honest, that is, we've got item 6, which of course was the minutes of the last meeting, which we've already done and approved because they were approved at committee. So I would say to everybody, thanks very much for attending the meeting. And this is only our second meeting, so we're only really getting started. And that's why we've got a workshop after this to see where we go from here. Biz? Biz?
Mention roads.
Sorry, Biz?
Are we not mentioning our roads? Money for our roads?
We've got a workshop after this.
The roads going to be workshops now, not meet area committees.
No. What we've done is, right, after this, the official part of this meeting, we're going to have a small, call it a workshop or call it another meeting, but that's what we're going to do. Okay.
I think the question of roads budget should be brought up at this meeting.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, if you want to put it.
I think this is a place it should be, and not a workshop.
No, we can bring it. The roads weren't on it just now because we've nobody for roads here, so we'd be just talking to ourselves. But we want to bring roads.
Well,
which
that's
we want
what we
to bring
should be at an area committee. We never we haven't seen each other for 3 months.
Yeah, we will be, Biz. That is one of the priorities we've got. This meeting, the 2 priorities, because of reports, etc., that the officers could do, was the COVID and the education to get the meeting started and get it kicked off. But we will be talking about roads. Don't worry about that. Okay,